Hi guys, good morning and welcome back on the channel. Today I will explain you fully how I'll build these little items here, the BMW R75 with sidecar. Before starting the full description of this BMW R75 sidecar, I'd like to announce the fact that I will start another project in parallel with this Saving Private Ryan diorama. Just to give some hints, it will be a project with wings, with water and with structural damage. As from now on you can start to imagine what it could be. I think the project will start within a couple of weeks. And a last point, I'd like to thank you all as well, all the guys from this community, for all the messages that I received in my previous video, in which I explained how I realized this first part, the building of this Ramel's bridge in XPS foam. Many thanks for all these comments. I was not expecting so many messages and so many views. So finger crossed, I really hope it will continue that way. It's a beautiful project. Obviously the bridge construction will take some time. As you can imagine, there is a lot of work in sculpting and doing the pavement structure. That's the reason why I also decided to run this second project in parallel. Okay guys, let's stop talking and let's see how I build this little BMW R75 sidecar. Okay, what are we talking about? This is the Great Wall Hobby kit. The scale is 1/35. It comes with a little sheet of photoetched and a few plastic sprues. For a little kit of this size, I was really impressed by the number of pieces included in this box. The sculpting details are very nice. And globally, the precision of the adjustments is quite good. I also used a photoetched set from Eduard for the Tamiya kit that I already had in stock. And to my opinion, it's a valuable asset to give this little kit a next level finish. If you decide to realize this construction, I highly advise you to buy the ArtScale kit 3D prints. ArtScale provides us with wonderful wheels and cylinder heads. The fitting on the GWH kit is perfect, so there is no alignment that will require specific work or adjustment. The details of the wheels is fantastic. The cylinder heads are beautiful. And the biggest advantage is that you will win a huge amount of time not having to remove the gluing seam on the cylinder, on the plastic ones, and also not having to try to construct the plastic wheels with the photoetched set from GWH. In this video, I'd like also to emphasize a little bit the use of oil paints for weathering. I think it could be interesting for beginners, and oil paints could also be a nice cheap alternative to all these ready-to-use products from any brands you can find on the scale modeling market. So here is the top 10 oil paints that I do consider important for any scale modelers to have in stock at home. I will show you later in this video how I use these oil paints to greatly improve the color palette of my base coat, for example, or the way I use these oil paints to create some effects like rust effect, grease effects, or any streaks, fuel streaks, dirt streaks, or dust effects on a very simple manner. Well, the first very good advice I can give you is to study the instruction manual, especially with this Great Wall Hobby kit. Unfortunately, even if the sculpting details are very good, the instruction manual lack a lot of precision. There are even mistakes, there are missing parts, so the parts are drawn on the sketch view, but without any number. Sometimes they ask you to glue some parts, but it's wrong. You don't have to use them because there is the sidecar option coming afterwards. So be careful with this instruction manual. As you can see on my copy here, I highlighted all the pieces that could be replaced by photoetched parts included in the GWH kit, and I highlighted all the other parts that could be replaced by the Eduard's photoetched sheet. I think that way is easier to identify all the part number at the time of building and to decide at that time if you use them or not. Personally, I do not use all the photoetched pieces. I think it's a case-by-case study because sometimes the original piece on the real piece of equipment has, for example, a round cross-section, like tubes, for example, and there are a lot of tubes on a motorcycle structure. And I don't think this is a good choice to replace these tube sections by flat elements, because photoetched parts basically are flat. The primary step of this build starts with the engine section, quite logically. I did not encounter any specific problem with this assembly. Now I had unfortunately one element which was melted on the plastic sprue, probably due to a poor manufacturing process. So I had to replace it and to recreate this piece with a little bit of evergreen rods. But this step is not difficult and it's quickly solved. To perfectly seal my glue seams, I'm used to using cyanoacrylate glue that I passed above the seam. I let it dry, then I sand it correctly. That's a technique I use also for my aircraft fuselage, and that proved to be very efficient and also very resistant. You don't have the risk to see cracks appearing in the future. Now, if you decide to work with the Eduard photoetched set, the driver seat structure will quickly become a question mark. I personally decided to replace the plastic molded structure by the photoetched set provided by Eduard. Folding the photoetched pieces was not a big issue, as you can see on these images. But nevertheless, you have to know that this option is really time consuming and will come with a lot of difficulties, especially to put this structure in position on the motorcycle structure. You will have to remove obviously the old plastic structure, which is quite ugly and absolutely not realistic. And then put the photoetched pieces in position, which is really complicated as you will have no more anchor points. Finally, this assembly will have 2 points of contact, the first one on bottom of the engine and the second one on top next to the seat within the gap of the fuel tank. The motorcycle structure is composed of 2 main pieces. Unfortunately, these pieces have ugly molding seam all around the tubes, so it will be necessary to care for this little imperfection. There are also a few molding imperfections on the fuel tanks, on the top side but also on the bottom side, and you will need some Tamiya basic putty to fill in these holes. And the biggest problem of this kit, to my opinion, is the fact that all the anchoring holes are undersized. Moreover, there are not enough anchoring holes, and their anchoring points are too big or melted with the rest of the piece and absolutely not usable. So all the fitting of the pieces in general is really a great problem. In the case of the main frame, as you can see on these images, it's almost impossible to reach a correct alignment as there is only one anchoring point. So I inserted a small styrene block in the aft section of the fuel tank to improve the alignment and block both pieces in the right position. A few words quickly on the 3D prints from Art Scale Kit. So as you can see, the wheels are really easy to remove from their sprue. There is almost no work to clean these wheels and remove all the injection points. The fitting on the GWH kit is perfect, so no big work of alignment, as I already explained. That will make you win a lot of time. If you decide to go for the kit wheels, each wheel comes with 4 plastic parts, in the middle of which you will have to insert 2 tiny photoetched discs. The alignment is rather difficult, and during the gluing process you might disalign or bend these photoetched parts quite easily, which is almost impossible to correct afterwards. Even after a perfect assembly and a good work, the final result is not so nice as the 3D prints. You have less spokes on each wheel, and the spokes are much thinner on the 3D prints. It is also very delicate and complicated to insert the central hub in plastic within these photoetched spokes. This fitting must be perfectly accurate because the smallest amount of pressure you apply on this hub will bend the delicate spokes in photoetched. The problem is that you have to do that 4 times. There are 4 wheels and there is no spare parts. So if you do something wrong, then you are in trouble. This central hub also comes in 2 parts, 1 on each side, so it doubles the risks. So to my opinion, these 3D prints from Art Scale Kit are really a must-have for this kit. Here is a side-by-side comparison. On the left side you have the GWH part with the photo etch, and on the right side you have the Art Scale Kit 3D print. The Art Scale Kit combo comes also with cylinder heads, which is very nice, as the GWH kit includes the cylinders divided each time in 2 parts, which implies that after gluing you will have a difficult gluing seam to remove in the middle of each cylinder. The fitting of the 3D print cylinder on the engine is really easy, there is no problem, as well as the fitting of all the engine accessories on these cylinders, like the fuel intake and the exhaust pipe fitting. The rear mudguard assembly was quite easy, and I maintained all the pieces from the GWH kit, no big problem. The Eduard photo etch sheet also proposed to remove this assembly and to use photo etch part, but I did not follow this direction because it seems to me a bit tricky and not really adapted. The only part that I maintained from Eduard was the lateral toolbox. As I explained, the engine is built first and will be also painted fully first and weathered, just because once inserted within the motorbike's frame, it will be really difficult to access this section and to paint it correctly. So as for all the other parts of this kit, I completely wash all the pieces before any paint procedures. All the kit parts will also be primed using Mr. Mahogany Surfacer 1000. For a dark gray model like this one, a black primer would be more interesting, I guess, but I had no such primer in stock at home, so I did with this primer that I already used for my Tiger 1, my Kettenkrad, and which is a very efficient primer. For the dilution, it's 60% thinner and 40% primer. The air pressure on my airbrush is 1.5 bars, and I use my needle 0.4 millimeters on this airbrush. The engine assembly received afterwards a layer of Tamiya gloss black X1. It's diluted at 50% thinner, 50% paint. I use my 0.4 millimeter needle, and the air pressure is still 1.5 bar. It will be a base coat for future metallic paints. The whole engine will be painted using Alclad white aluminium. I will also use some touch of burnt iron and steel from the same brand, but only on the cylinder heads. I will also use the white aluminium on some other plastic parts, like the brake handles on the handlebar and on some sections of the drive shaft. These parts have been washed and primed and also covered with gloss black prior this white aluminium application. All Alclad colors are applied pure, without any dilution, without any thinner. I use an air pressure of 1.8 bar, 2 bars are okay, and the needle here is my 0.2 needle. As I had to work more locally with the burnt iron and steel references, I decided to remove my airbrush needle cover to gain in precision, and I use these colors only on the cylinders to simulate the presence of hotter region. I then create my own wash with lamp black diluted in white spirit. What I really find interesting with all paint washes is that you can really control the thickness mixture by increasing oil paint within your white spirit. So it's really easy to control the depth of your effects. It also dries quickly thanks to the use of an air dryer, and you can remove the excess and blend the colors with another paintbrush dipped in white spirit. So that's what you are seeing here. Now there is a very important point about paintbrush for oil paints. Personally, I highly advise you to use natural bristle paintbrush when you use oil paints. The reason is that I do think they have a better grip on the oil paint, and each individual bristle have a kind of split end which permits to get a kind of softer touch on the paint, and to pull it, to drag it on a less straight manner. I mean, the diffusion, the blending of the paint is much more diffused. It's less straight, so the blending of the colors is much softer. The paintbrush I'm using all the time for this kind of job is Recap 316 Red Stable. I then applied a little bit of raw umber left and right to start to dirt a bit the engine. There are a lot of people removing the linseed oil by applying their oil paint on the cardboard section. Personally, I don't do that. I must confess that most of my oil paints are quite old, and they are already less linseed oil than when you buy a new tube. I generally remove the excess of linseed oil on top of the tube when I open it. Now I remove, for example, 1 or 2 millimeters of paint that I just left aside, and I use the paint which is below. Why do I prefer using my paint that way? It's just because the linseed oil permits the pigments within the oil paint to travel a little bit. That means that during the drying process, these pigments are still able to move and to blend with the different colors. A good way to blend the paint dots you have applied is to beat these paint dots with the paintbrush bristles. Okay, we now have a dirty engine, so I still need to paint some pedals and sections in dark gray using the AK reference 11022. That's an acrylic color, but there is no problem to apply it above this old work we did previously. I then use black from AK to paint the spark plugs cables done with lead wire 0.3 millimeters, and also the battery. I finally dusted the engine in 2 steps. The first step with North Africa dust nature effect from Megamo. I apply it locally with a little paintbrush, making some dots, and afterwards using another paintbrush to blend the effect. I will show you later how to do exactly the same job only with all paints. But this product was new to me and I wanted to experiment it, so that's the reason why I tested it on this engine. I also speckled the engine with shaft and bearing grease from AK. That's a step that you can easily do with all paint as well, just using a lamp black mixture with white spirit. The last step to complete this engine was the dusting, the second step of dusting using XF 57 buff from Tamiya, diluted at 90% and applied with the airbrush with an air pressure of 1.5 bar. The needle used was the 0.2. The engine location close to the ground makes it a part of the motorcycle, which is obviously prone to dust and dirt. Here, with a highly diluted mixture, we can simulate a smooth layer of dust. Well, that's it for this engine section. I thought it was easier to make it completely and to paint it completely before working with the frame around it. Let's see now how I realized the toolbox located on the left half side of the motorcycle. For this box I used the Eduard photoetched set, initially planned for the Tamiya kit. As I thought it was much nicer than the plastic piece provided by GWH. The folding is quite easy, it's just a matter of precision, and you can glue and seal the box with cyanoacrylate glue. This box from Eduard is very nice, comes with very thin details like the handles, the hinges, and also some lockers, which is very nice. As you can see, the sizes of both boxes identical. A point that I also do not understand from GWH is why all 3 toolboxes that they provide in the kit are hollow. They are not closed on the back side. This is very strange because once in position it is visible, so that's really not nice. The toolbox support on the rear mudguard has also been replaced using the photoetched set from Eduard, as it is much thinner and much more detailed. Anyway, that's a tricky part. There are a lot of very thin parts, and I must confess that unfortunately I broke some parts from time to time, so I had to rebuild some hinges with brush sheet. No big deal anyway, but it will require a small amount of patience. This is also the reason why I decided to build this box, to paint it and to weather it completely, leaving the box aside for the rest of the construction, to be sure to keep the whole set protected. The box support also have the correct size, so the fitting on the rear mudguard is quite easy. There is no specific problem with this. Prior to painting the toolbox, this assembly will be washed with water and soap and primed like we did for the engine with Mr. Mahogany primer. This toolbox and the fuel jerrycan on the right side of the motorcycle will be painted using a dark yellow. For this I use a mixture of RC060 dark yellow at 80% with RC018 pale sand at 20%. The mixture is 50% paint, 50% thinner, and the whole thing is airbrushed using the needle 0.2 and an air pressure of 1.5 bar. I thought it was much more interesting to paint these two elements with dark yellow, just to create more color variation and to avoid having a complete dull dark gray motorcycle. I also gave a three-tone camouflage to the toolbox, which was quite typical from the German army at that era, just to suggest that this toolbox had been taken on another BMW R75. For the green lines, I used the RC047 from AK, diluted at 60%, and the airbrush pressure at 1 bar without the needle cover to gain in precision, as you can see on these images. The brown line are realized with the references RC068 red-brown at 80% and RC060 dark yellow at 20%. The paint mixture is diluted at 60% thinner, 40% paint. I continue to work with an air pressure of 1 bar and my needle 0.2 without the needle cover. I use the same chipping method for both the fuel tank and the toolbox. For the whole motorcycle, the chipping method will be a two-step method to increase the 3D effect of the paint. The first step will be to apply chipping with a light color. The second step will be to apply it over this first layer, a second chipping effect with a darker color. We will see here what are the references used for the fuel tank and the toolbox. We will use other references for the dark gray. For the fuel tank and the toolbox, the first layer will be done with Grimy Gray 11008 from AK Interactive. I start with a very thin paintbrush and I concentrate this effect, this first step, on the edges of the pieces. You can also already introduce some very thin scratches at this stage. For the second step of the chipping, I use the Model Air series from Vallejo, reference 042, camouflage black-brown. I started first with the paintbrush to precisely apply this paint above the light colored dots. The idea is to simulate deeper notches in the paint where the corroded metal starts to become visible. I also add some scratches with this reference using the small paintbrush. I continue with the same paint reference using the sponge method just to increase a little bit the scratches effect all around the piece, but it should be very smooth in order not to overdo the effect. The rest of the weathering for these two pieces is quite easy. It consists of a dark wash and some rust streaks. I will show you now the way to do it with ready-to-use product, and later in the video I will show you the way to do it only with all paints. I use dark wash from Megamo for this first step. Concentrate this product in all the crevices and all the sculpting details of your piece. Dry it quicker with the hairdryer and remove the excess with a paintbrush dipped in white spirit. I use my paintbrush for oil paints with natural bristles, and as you can see, you can brush your piece vertically as well to create some fuel streaks or dirt streaks. I used rust streaks from AK Interactive only for the fuel jerrycan to simulate very small rust dots appearing. I did not use this product for the toolbox. You will see later on in this video the way to do it only with all paints. Once dry, just brush these rust dots with your paintbrush vertically. Do not apply too much white spirit, otherwise you will remove completely the product. So try to work with an almost dry paintbrush, and by brushing this piece vertically, you will create subtle and very nice rust streaks on your piece. If you want to reinforce this effect, you can apply multiple layers of rust streaks product and repeat the operation 2 or 3 times. The final touch for these two pieces of equipment are the black pencil. I love using black pencil to reinforce the metal effect of the different pieces of equipment. Here I use the 4B pencil. You can pass just at some location around the edges to reinforce the metallic aspect of the piece. Okay, for my motorcycle, I decided to use the German grey color as a reference and to use Tamiya paint. The Tamiya reference is XF63 for the German grey. Anyway, I wanted to have it a little bit more faded and dirty, with a very subtle bluish color within this base coat. I also identified on a piece of cardboard the AK references that I could use to make some corrections and to paint some little items with my paintbrush. Prior the base coat application, obviously all pieces are washed, dried and primed as explained in the beginning of this video. My base coat mixture was 70% of XF63 German grey, 5% of royal blue X3, 20% of XF2 flat white and 5% of XF57 buff. This mixture is diluted with 50% thinner, the lacquer thinner from Tamiya with the yellow cap, and 50% paint mixture. For the airbrush, the air pressure will be 1.5 bars and I work with my needle 0.2. This mixture gives us already from the beginning a nice old faded German grey. I will use another version for the highlights. As you can see, I thought it was important to paint all these pieces prior assembly, just because obviously it will be much more complicated after the assembly to paint all the tube and all the little corners, especially with the engine mounted in the middle and with the engine which is already painted and weathered. I also painted all the four wheels with rubber black and a paintbrush. For the same reason as for the engine, I decided also to apply the chipping effect and the weathering prior assembly, just because the wheels are enclosed in a difficult area to reach with paintbrush, so it facilitates the works for later on. As I explained for the toolbox, I apply a two-step chipping procedure. A first light color, here using neutral grey or grey blue from AK Interactive, and then later on a darker color. I started first to remove the rubber black on the wheel rim. I had the shaking hand, so needs to do the job twice. And then I applied these light colors on the edges of the pieces. The chipping procedure is exactly the same as for the toolbox and the fuel jerrycan. I used the blue-gray reference from AK for the light color chipping on some parts of the pieces. Logically, it's mainly on the edges. It was also necessary to apply this chipping effect on the rear wheel, on the rear gearbox. The second step of the chipping was done using another reference than the camouflage black-brown. I used chocolate from AK. It's just to create a little bit more color variation. You can also use the leather reference from AK to do this chipping. Okay guys, in this video I wanted to emphasize a little bit the use of oil paint. Let's see now how we can realize buff color with oil paints and use it to dust the model. It's really easy. The only three references you need are titanium white, lamp black and ochre yellow. We'll start first to create a light gray color, mixing a little bit of lamp black within a lot of titanium white. Once you've got your light gray, add small amount of ochre yellow. You can add it progressively until you reach the buff reference you need. We will start here with a dust wash, so mixing part of this mixture with a lot of white spirit. Stir this mixture of all paints within the white spirit correctly with your paintbrush, adding progressively more and more oil paint until your mixture has the correct density. Okay, it's done. You've got your own dust effect product, cheap and efficient. You now just have to apply this mixture in all the crevices you want, accelerate the drying time with the air dryer, and then remove the excess with another paintbrush filled in with white spirit. Quite easy. Now, in the case of our wheels, think about brushing your wheels in the natural flow direction. So I mean here, from the inside of the wheel towards the outside of the wheel. That way you will immediately create nice dust streaks on your wheel in the correct direction. For the tire structure, I advise you to use your paintbrush parallel with the surface of the tire. That way you just remove the buff color on the surface which is in contact with the ground, while in the crevices your product remain correctly dry and visible. The second step of dusting consists of adding progressively more and more buff oil paint, pure, not diluted with white spirit, at key locations where this dust could have accumulated. And then again, with your paintbrush and white spirit, you can punch this oil paint with the paintbrush bristles to blend these oil paint colors with the rest of the piece. Basically, these are the two main manners to work with oil paints. I mean here, or you drag it, you pull it, the oil paint, mainly for the vertical surfaces to create streaks, or you punch it with the paintbrush bristle just to blend it with the underneath surfaces. When using the punching technique, the more you punch on this oil paint, the more it will be blended with the underneath surfaces. Now, for example, when I want to create a grease effect and I want a really greasy appearance, then I put my oil paint pure and I punch it only very lightly, only a few times, just to leave the oil paint consistent. Here I'm creating a shaft and bearing grease. To do so, I mix at equal parts burnt umber and lamp black. As you can see, I work on a ceramic tile and I don't remove the linseed oil to keep my oil paint as greasy as I can. I apply this greasy mixture on my rear gearbox, pure, with a small paintbrush, as you can see here, and then I punch it with the other paintbrush with a little bit of white spirit. As I said here, if you want really to maintain this greasy aspect, don't blend it too much, don't punch it too much. As you can see here, the dust effect is also nicely present, only using oil paints. As you probably noticed, for the four wheels I didn't use any dark wash. That was on purpose, given the wheels are already dark grey and they are also close to the ground, in contact with the ground. I wanted to have my wheels as dusty as I could, so with a poor contrast. Using a dark wash would amplify the contrast and of course could reduce the dust effect. Okay, we can continue with the assembly. Here, no big issue if you prepare in advance and you study the fitting. I highly advise you to insert a lead wire, 0.4 millimeters, within the rear wheel axis, just to solidify a bit the assembly. It will also be necessary to erase the gluing seam using cyanoacrylate that you send afterwards. Prior the final painting operation, I will form three groups. The first group is the main chassis, the second group is the front wheel assembly, and the last group will be the sidecar in itself. So these three parts will stay separated until the end of the painting and the end of the weathering. Watch out anyway with the front wheel assembly. You will need a lot of real picture to align the tube frame correctly, as there is almost no indication within the instruction manual. The exact positioning of all the tubes around the front wheel is very delicate, and you have to take into consideration as well that the front wheel assembly is at an angle with the main chassis. For the engine shield, as you can see here, you have the choice in between the GWH kit or the Eduard set. Personally, I opted for the Eduard pieces, which are a bit smaller and that fits better with the pieces. The sculpting detail is also nicer on the Eduard photoetched. The exhaust pipe system is also quite tricky. First of all, the exhaust collector that comes in front of both cylinders is too small. If you look at a reference picture, you will see that it's too short. So I create a new one with evergreen rods having the same the diameter. The biggest issue is also the problem of anchoring hole and anchoring point. That's the same for all the kit. It's impossible to join two pieces without working first on the hole and then on the point. So that means that you will have to drill all the anchoring hole again and to create new anchor points for the exhaust system to be able to joint all these elements together. As you can see, my anchoring point have been done with a lead wire with a diameter of 0.4 millimeters that I inserted in the previously drilled section and glued with cyanoacrylate glue. It's a very delicate work because these pipe sections are really thin and drilling inside of them was quite a challenge. The positioning as well of these tubes together is quite challenging. I really wanted to be able to paint the whole exhaust system separately from the motorcycle, just to gain in precision and to make a nice painting. So I glued all the exhaust pipes together without fixing to the cylinders. Then a new problem popped out, that's the main exhaust pipe was too short. So I built a new one with evergreen rods having the same diameter. Again, a new challenge, a quite delicate operation to drill anchoring hole and anchoring point on both extremities, and moreover to give this evergreen section the correct curvature. After many trials, it was time to assemble all the different parts together to get the full exhaust pipe system ready for painting. The Eduard photoetched part for the exhaust was foreseen for the Tamiya kit and was too big to be used, so I did not use it. And the last detail on this exhaust pipe was the reinforcement of its first section at the exit of the exhaust collector. It was reproduced with Tamiya masking tape. Okay, how did I paint my exhaust pipes? First of all, it was washed and primed, just like the rest of the motorcycle. And then the exhaust muffler, only the muffler was painted with the dark gray base coat, the one I used for the main chassis. I then taped this muffler with a little bit of Tamiya tape, as you can see on the images, before painting the whole assembly with gloss black X1, the same setting as for the engine painting. The first section of the exhaust pipe coming out from the cylinders received a layer of gunmetal, alclad. All the rest of the assembly received a layer of steel. Now for the dilution, it's exactly the same for all the alclad reference. As you can see, the cylinder exhaust is a little bit darker. I finally had the reference burnt iron from alclad as well, at some key location and quite randomly, just to give more contrast and more color variation to my exhaust pipe system. Okay, it's done for the painting. Let's go for the weathering. First of all, I use the chipping fluid from Migamo for the muffler. As I told you, this muffler was painted German grey. I applied 3 coats of this product with an air pressure of 1.5 bars, each time accelerating the drying time with the air dryer. I then used the dark rust reference. It's an acrylic 3rd generation from AK Interactive, but instead of using with the paintbrush, I use it with the airbrush. The dilution is done with the thinner of this brand. I have no reference here because it's more like visual. I diluted this paint until reaching a very liquid and transparent color, just like it is often said, like the milk consistency. My idea for this exhaust was to try to reproduce an exhaust which is not completely rusted. We are in 1944, these motorcycles are not so old. Anyway, they had a pretty harsh life, harsh environment during all these operations, whether it was within the African desert or on the Eastern Front, prior to arriving in the Normandy theater. So my idea was to reproduce an exhaust which was starting to rust left and right, but not completely crusted. So I applied this dark rust reference with the airbrush in light clouds, left and right, but I did not completely cover the exhaust pipes. I then used these 3 references, laser brown, medium rust and hull red, using the sponge technique to reproduce the appearance of rust left and right. I mainly focused this work on all these areas that were painted with the airbrush with the dark rust reference. The final paint used for this exhaust was the orange brown, and for this one I worked mainly with the paintbrush. This paint was highly diluted with water just to create a kind of cloud of very young rust appearing progressively. Okay, we now have to reactivate our chipping fluid using water and just now create scratches in the German grey paint that will reappear, of course. This exhaust muffler had in fact a metallic cover on top of it that was painted in the motorcycle color, and this color had the tendency to crack and disappear due to the exhaust heat. Okay chaps, let's close this chapter now. It's not the aim to make a Lord of the Rings episode, so I think it's time to stop here. By the end of this week, or perhaps at the beginning of next week, I will come with the rest of all these items. We still need to build the sidecar, paint the inside, paint the outside. We have to weather and use the oil paints for the weathering. So still a lot of items to show to you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for the next one, and many thanks for your attention. Greetings from Portugal. Ciao guys.